Ever get this feeling like we're all just kind of puppets, like dancing to these invisible strings?
Oh, absolutely.
Today's deep dive, we're going to get into all that. Like how this social world around us, it shapes us way more than we realize, probably.
Yeah, it's true.
We've got a whole stack of social psych research here, ready to unpack, figure out what makes us tick, those hidden forces.
Yeah, I think we really underestimate how much our environment kind of pushes and pulls us in different directions,
Yeah.
Like we like to think, oh, this is just who I am, this is how I act.
Right. It's my personality.
Right, exactly. But then you look at something as simple as like, what if we just changed the name of a game?
Okay, now you've got to give me an example.
Right, so picture this. There was this experiment, right?
Yeah.
Researchers, they got people to play a game.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of boring, right? But here's the thing. When they called the game Wall Street, people, they got ruthless.
Oh, wow.
Way more competitive than when they called it Community.
Wait, seriously? That's wild. Just the name alone had that much of an effect.
I know, right? It just shows you how these little cues, they get in there, kind of subconsciously.
Right.
Without us even knowing it. Maybe we're more greedy, more competitive.
Fascinating.
And this whole idea that it's not just our personality, but the situation that drives us pops up everywhere.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see it like someone cuts me off in traffic.
Right.
Immediately, I'm like...
Right, exactly.
But maybe they're rushing to the hospital. I don't know, right?
Exactly. That's what they call the fundamental attribution error right there.
Yeah.
We're jumping to conclusions about who someone is based on this tiny little glimpse of their behavior.
Right.
We're wired to judge quickly, but that doesn't mean we're right.
Okay, so first impressions are really just these snap judgments, but man, they are powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Once you've got that initial opinion, it's like stuck,
Yeah, it's so true. Like, think of it this way. Those first impressions, they create these schemas. It's a fancy psych word.
Right.
But basically, these are like mental shortcuts our brains use to make sense of everything.
Okay.
They're like those fill-in-the-blank puzzles,
Yeah.
We've got a couple pieces of information.
Right.
And our brain's like, I got this. I'm going to complete the picture, even if it has to, like, make stuff up to do it.
And we make decisions based on these incomplete pictures. No wonder we have so many misunderstandings.
Right. And what's even more wild is how these schemas, these shortcuts, they even mess with our memories. We tend to think of memories like a perfect recording, right? Like a video.
Yeah, you just hit rewind.
Right. But they're actually incredibly fragile, like constantly being reshaped by new information.
Wow.
And even just by the way we talk about them.
You're telling me even eyewitness testimony isn't as reliable as we think? Like it seems like in those high-pressure situations, your memory would be crystal clear.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But the research tells a different story.
Oh, really?
It does. So imagine this. You witness a crime, you're nervous, details are fuzzy, right?
Right.
Now let's say an authority figure, maybe a police officer, they give you some positive feedback on what you remember.
Oh, interesting.
Even if some of it wasn't quite accurate.
Okay.
You know what happened.
You're going to cling to that, right? Like, oh, they said I did good, so it must be right.
Exactly. Studies show that even these little cues from authority figures can totally change our memories.
Wow.
It's like our brains, they really crave that confirmation, Makes us way more susceptible to suggestion without even realizing it.
Okay, wow. So it's like our memories are basically open to being rewritten.
Yeah.
Kind of freaky if you think about it too much.
Right.
Makes you wonder what else we're susceptible to, especially from other people.
Well, and speaking of being swayed by others, let's talk about the power of groups for a second.
Oh, here we go.
Because you think a police officer kind of nudging your memory is something.
Right.
What about like an entire room full of people telling you you're wrong about something when you know you're right?
Okay, you're talking about those conformity experiments, right?
Exactly.
Like everyone's saying the wrong answer just because everyone else is.
Classic, right? The ash line experiment.
Right, right.
They show you these lines, different lengths, and you just got to match them.
Yeah, seems pretty straightforward.
Super simple. But when everyone else in the group picks the wrong line, huge percentage of people go along with it.
Even they had to have known, right?
They can see it.
Wow.
It's right there.
So even with like low stakes, peer pressure is real.
Totally.
But it's got to be even more intense when there are real consequences. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Think about like juries.
Oh, right.
That pressure to conform, I mean, that can lead to wrongful convictions.
Yeah, especially if you've got one really dominant personality in the group.
Exactly. And especially now, I mean, think about it, social media.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Opinions are spreading like wildfire.
It's constant.
That pressure to conform online. Huge, huge, huge.
We see it all the time, right? People just jumping on these trends just because everyone else is, even if it's kind of messed up.
It's primal, right? We want to be accepted. We don't want to be the ones on the outside.
Right. Makes sense. Like back in the day, you're part of a tribe. If you got kicked out, that was it, right?
Survival instinct, literally.
Wow. So our brains are still kind of playing by the same rules, huh?
Still running that old software, yep.
Even in this modern world. Okay, that's interesting, but it also makes me feel kind of, I don't know, trapped.
For sure. It's a total double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you got that deep need to belong, which is good.
Right.
But it can also lead to things like groupthink, you know, where everyone just wants to keep the peace.
Right. Rather be agreeable than right.
And no one wants to rock the boat, so critical thinking goes right out the window.
Right. And that's how you end up with some majorly bad decisions.
Oh, yeah. Historical cover-ups, corporate scandals, you name it.
Right. Okay, so that's the dark side of groups.
Definitely.
But they can also be a force for good, too, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, look at all the social movements we've seen.
Yeah. People coming together to fight for good causes.
Exactly. That's the power of groups, too.
That's the flip side, right?
Yeah.
So much potential for positive change. You know about the jigsaw classroom technique.
I don't think so.
So it's this cool method where they divide students into these diverse groups.
Okay.
And each person, they learn like a unique piece of the puzzle.
I like that.
They have to work together, rely on each other to get the full picture.
Oh, I like that a lot, actually. It's like that dependence on each other forces them to get past those us versus them barriers.
Exactly.
So what? It reduces prejudice?
They've done studies, yeah. Reduces prejudice, people's self-esteem goes up.
Wow.
Academic performance, across the board, better.
That's incredible.
It's pretty amazing.
See, that's what I'm talking about, like groups bringing out the best in us.
Right.
Not just the worst. But let's be real. Sometimes we just got to focus on ourselves for a minute, right?
Sure.
Like our own individual happiness. Where does that fit into all of this? So we've been talking about how our brains are like wired for connection, right?
Yeah.
Even if it means we end up, I don't know, kind of going along with the group a little too much sometimes.
Right.
But what about our own happiness?
Right.
Like just individually feeling good. How does that fit in?
Well, you'd think, right? Happiness, it's all about getting more stuff, right?
Yeah, more achievements, more possessions. That's what we're told.
The things, yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, there's some interesting research in social psych that says, not so fast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They've actually found a link between sustainable living, like consuming less.
Wait, hold on. So you're telling me less stuff equals more happiness?
That's what it's looking like.
That feels, I don't know, backwards in this world of buy, buy, buy.
It does, right. It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But it actually makes sense when you think about intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
Like experiences,
Right.
meaningful connections, those things.
Those stick with you.
Yeah. They tend to create longer lasting happiness than just like buying the next gadget.
Right, because the thrill of that new phone or whatever wears off so quickly.
Exactly.
But that memory of a trip with friends, that's going to last.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of connections,
Right.
relationships, those have got to be key to happiness.
Oh, huge.
Hmm.
But it's not just about being in a relationship.
Right, I was just thinking that. It's more nuanced than that, right?
It's the quality of those connections,
Totally.
Like a lot of times we approach relationships with this like social exchange mindset.
Oh, interesting, like a transaction almost.
Kinda, yeah. Like we're trying to, maximize our rewards, minimize our costs,
Yeah.
But what really matters, for long-term happiness at least, is fairness.
Right, I can see that.
Psychologists call it equity theory.
Okay, so it's not about like keeping score, but it's got to feel balanced.
Right. Like both partners are contributing equally.
Right, you got to feel valued, appreciated for what you bring to the table.
Exactly. And when it's lopsided, that's when you start to see resentment,
Oh, yeah, conflict, all that.
Right. But when both people feel seen, respected.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah, that's the recipe for a happy, stable relationship.
I like it. Balance is key. So we've got sustainable living, strong relationships, anything else?
Any other social psych secrets to unlock in the happiness vault? Let's see.
Yeah, give me one more. One more.
This one's going to surprise you, I think. Research actually suggests that doing acts of kindness,
Okay, I've heard this.
even small ones, can actually make you happier.
Right, but how does that work? Like, I get that it's a nice thing to do, but what's the science behind it?
So it turns out when we help other people, our brains, they release endorphins.
Oh, the feel-good chemicals.
Exactly. And it also shifts our focus, right? Like away from our own problems.
So it's like helping others is actually a form of self-care in a way.
Kind of, yeah. It's a win-win, really. The other person benefits, and you feel good.
I like it. All right, so we've got some good strategies here, but let's be real, life is not always, sunshine and roses.
That's true. There's always going to be bumps in the road.
Exactly. So how do we deal with those inevitable tough times? Stress, negativity, any tips from social psych on how to cope?
Definitely. And it's not just about thinking positive thoughts all the time. It's more about how we frame those tough experiences, you
All
know?
right, like our mindset going into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Research shows that if we can look at those stressful things as challenges, things we can overcome,
Okay.
instead of threats, things that just completely overwhelm us,
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
it helps us build resilience.
So it's like a mental shift, right? Like instead of I can't handle this, it's more like, okay, how can I tackle this problem?
That's it. And it takes practice, for sure, but it gets easier.
Right. It's a skill.
It is.
Mhm.
There's actually tools out there, like expressive writing, for example.
What's that?
Super simple. You basically just write about the stressful things you're dealing with.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and studies have shown it can actually improve not just your mental health, but your physical health too.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
So just getting it all out on paper helps us process things better.
It's like clearing out the mental cobwebs.
I like it. It's funny, so much of what we've talked about today, it really comes back to our minds.
It does, doesn't it?
How we think, how we see the world, it's all connected. It's like social psychology is giving us this user manual for our brains,
I love that. And like with any good user manual,
right?
it's good to, check back in on the instructions every now and then.
Absolutely, got to refresh. Well, that was a wild ride, I gotta say.
It really was.
We covered a lot of ground. The power of memories, how wanting to belong can push us in all these different directions, and even some strategies to boost our happiness.
It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. So next time you find yourself reacting to something, ask yourself, is this really me, or is it my social programming taking over? It's something to think about.
It really is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into social psychology. We'll see you next time.